Larry Bird after the first-class performance and said, well, can you exceed them? But let me try. First, as a preliminary, remember that Jack said that everyone conceded that Mr. al-Awlaki, whether he was charged with crime or not, was a bad guy. That maybe the power to assassinate could be turned on innocents. Within a few days after the al-Awlaki assassination, his 16-year-old son was vaporized by a predator drug. Now, you don't hear about that in the news. He became an unperson because it was embarrassing. But these are the real facts that, if the government was truthful, it would be on front pages. 2,000 years ago, their proudest boast was, I am a Roman. Civis Romanus sum. 200 years ago, in the world of liberty, the proudest boast was, I am an American. Today, in the world of liberty, the United States is now in the caboose. It's not the locomotive. Let me give you one example. When the United States was considering turning over its prisoners in Bagram to the Afghan authorities in anticipation of leaving the country, whether in 1 year, 2 years, or even decades, the proceeding had to be stopped because we told the Afghans, you don't have any authority to detain people without accusation or charge. You'd have to release them because there's no evidence that they're engaged in crime. So they had to accommodate a more democratic dispensation to our national security state in order to receive the prisoners that we were detaining. I was speaking just yesterday to a group of constitutional specialists from Asian countries like Pakistan. They spoke about they have a national security constitution. Said, Mr. Fein, we now have our presidents pointing to the United States to justify the emergency powers. They say, oh, the United States was slow catching up with the Military Commissions Act, Patriot Act, and whatever. That is how far we have come from our origins. From being the boast of the world. Due process, the most important idea in the history of civilization. The idea that in the United States there's only one race, ethnicity, religion, color, creed, orientation. America. No longer in the United States. And I think I can convince you that we today have come full circle from 1776 to emulate the King of Great Britain, George III, that we took up arms to overthrow. That all of those lives, the blood, the carnage, the risks, the sacrifices, and the interim hundreds of years, we have forfeited. We have a president endowed with vastly more authority than King George III, whose powers we thought were so oppressive, justified risking that last full measure of devotion, pledging their lives, their fortune, their sacred honor to overthrow. And what does this generation do? Nothing. The evidence is open and notorious. You don't need archaeological expeditions to discover that the President has flouted the specific command, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 in the Constitution. Only Congress can authorize the initiation of warfare. And we talk about these constitutional violations. It's just not an academic matter that they don't have real, substantive consequences. The reason why the article was placed in the Constitution was precisely because what is the history of mankind but a history of executive, inflating danger, frightening the people to go to war to aggrandize executive power. Because war brings the secrecy, the taxes, the contracts, the jingoism, the footprints in the sands of time. I'll transform the world. Remember Julius Caesar, Vidi, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. And that's why the Founding Fathers said, we don't want our executive, even someone as pure as George Washington, exercising that awesome authority to take a country from a state of peace to a state of war. Let's pause for a second. Why is that such an awesome power? From peace to war. Cicero said 2,000 years ago, that's true today, in times of war, the law is silent. It doesn't matter even if you wrote down provisions, all the Geneva Conventions and war crimes No country prosecutes its own people for trying to defend itself. It doesn't happen whether it's in Abu Ghraib or killing civilians on the stones of Afghanistan. They get slaps on the wrist. There is no law in times of war. When we talk about the authorization to use military force, the law that provided what the authority the president could utilize the military to go and target, the vaporize, it specifically states in words, the universe of people who can be killed, those who are directly involved in the 9/11 attacks, or those who harbored those who were directly involved. That's the words. Flouted from day one. Totally tortured the language, so now it means any conceivable suspected terrorist anywhere in the planet, maybe even on the moon for Newt Gingrich, maybe goes interstellar. The president can use predator drones anywhere to kill them. It's nowhere in the language. No one protests. No one protests. Because at wartime, it's, well, we really can't expect that when someone's risking their life, that they should have to take any risks at all. And it even comes to this lunacy, if you will, with regard to the predator drones. The military justification now for using the drones, even though they're oftentimes misdirected, that is, they kill innocent civilians. Most recently, the disclosure that they're used to target those who come rescue the initial victims of the predator drones, was that we can't engage in military tactics that expose our soldiers to danger. No? So now our soldiers are not supposed to be exposed to danger, so they have to kill everybody, including the civilians, just because a more precise targeting would require them to get human intelligence and to try a scalpel rather than a blunderbuss. And that, ladies and gentlemen, what was used to justify the argument, there was no war in Libya. Yeah, we're sending rockets. We could have sent nuclear missiles with warheads, incinerated every living thing. But as long as it doesn't endanger our soldiers, it's not war. Just think of that Orwellian concept. We can kill the whole world and it's not war. It's not conflict. Something beyond the imagination of George Orwell's Ministry of Peace and Ministry of War. Truth and falsehood. They mix. They conflate each other. That's our government, and we are responsible for every bit as much as everyone who lived in the Third Reich was responsible for the Holocaust. Those who sat as spectators and watched the government be destroyed become complicit. Maybe it's not first-class genocide, but it is complicit. As Dante wrote, those who state a strict neutrality in times of moral crisis are destined for the hottest phase of hell. You don't take neutrality between the firefighter and the fight. You take sides between the firefighter and the fight. And if we could go today and examine the fundamental precepts of our country at the founding, in the Constitution, and consider how they've been turned on their head, I think I can inspire you to suggest that there's only one way forward. Throw the current elected officials out of office to set a litmus test that only those who will subscribe to constitutional precepts should ever get our support. Now, if we read the Declaration of Independence, the most important thing it tells us is why we have government and what rights we have just because we're born. It says we are all, because we're human, endowed with unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And at that time, pursuit of happiness was not hedonism. It was a search for wisdom and virtue. And we, because we're born, don't have to justify those rights. They're ours automatically. And it says governments are instituted for one reason and one reason alone: to secure and protect those rights. Governments are not instituted to grow bureaucracies. They're not instituted for jobs programs. They're not instituted to build empires. They're instituted for one reason and one reason alone: to secure liberty. The glory of a republic is liberty. The glory of an empire is domination. And the Founding Fathers knew that distinction very clearly. And they knew what side they wanted to opt on. Now, where we are today. Oh, the purpose of government is go everywhere in the world. Make us safe. Use whatever military force you want. You can spy on us. You can steal our emails, our Twitter messages. You can get a fingerprint printout of every electronic communication we've ever made. No warrants whatsoever, just make us safe. These authorities that would have been shocking to the Founding Fathers, they protested and they started the American Revolution because the king was sending in petty officials to search for contraband without proper particularized warrants. That invasion of the right to be left alone was sufficient to spark the American Revolution. The invasions of our right to be left alone are many-fold. That experience. Many-fold. And because of decisions of the United States Supreme Court, we don't even have any constitutional protection against the government going to Google, to Yahoo, all these internet providers and saying, we want to know what X, Y, and Z has done on the internet. We aren't notified of the request. We don't know what the government is doing with the information. It's all free. And we will be soon confronting surveillance drones everywhere in the United States, where we will have pictures taken of us wherever we go, 24 hours a day. And then they'll have John Poindexter, somebody, Dr. Strangelove, trying to decide whether if we visit certain locations, if you do to McDonald's and then you go to a mosque and then to a church, my gosh, that's an algorithm for terrorism. And then they pick us up and send us to Guantanamo Bay to Rockville. It sounds surreal. That's what all empires think before they fall to ruination. That's what everyone thought about Adolf Hitler before the death camps. It just won't happen here. But it can happen. And it has happened in the past. And we already have instances where not only have they have assassinations there, I'm told that there are additional people who are on Obama's list to be assassinated. We don't know how you get on, how you get off. There's no notice. And these are not the qualms of those who are exceptionally squeamish. Two examples. Dennis Blair, he was formerly the head of the Department of National Intelligence. Michael Hayden, former head of the CIA and the National Security Agency, involved in spying all the time. They both said, what are we doing to these predator drones? The only countries in the world who think they're legal are the United States and Israel. Nobody else does. And we're creating enemies. Because if you have your son or daughter or kid killed by a predator drone, you're kind of probably angry at the perpetrator. That's not because you hate freedom, because you'd like to live rather than die. It's sort of a fundamental feeling that all the human species enjoys, right? It's not because you hate elections or free speech. And that's what's happening. Most recently, there was a sentencing proceeding in New York, Southern District of New York. Faisal Shahzad was accused, Pakistani, was accused of planting a bomb in a vehicle in Times Square and wanted to blow up the vehicle and perhaps kill civilians. And the presiding judge was saying, well, why are you trying to do that? Why would you engage in such a callous act? He said, well, you're at war. With the United States has declared war against terrorism and Islam, basically. So I'm engaged in warfare. And the judge said, well, but why are you killing? Why would you target something that could kill women and children? He said, well, your predator drones kill women and children. You want me to play by Queensberry rules when you destroy our entire civilization? No answer. There wasn't any. No answer. Double standards. We understand why it is that the world turns against us and we're no longer looked as the beacon of liberty anymore. Anyway, let's take those fundamental principles that we've seen, that we've wrenched from their moorings. We no longer have governments instituted in order to protect unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We now have the government instituted to destroy rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Turns it on their head. What is the government about? It's about killing people, using coercion, using force over others, without due process, without legitimacy. That is what our government is about. The FBI recently instituted a new narrative for beginning to spy on you and me. It's called creating assessments. I worked with the Justice Department for long years. That time, you could have a preliminary inquiry with the FBI if there was some articulable suspicion that the target was engaged in criminal activity. But now assessments are initiated under the Orwellian idea that if a bureau official sees someone and says, they have done nothing wrong, I have no evidence to think that they are going to do anything wrong in the near future, but I think they could be a bad person. So I want to reassure myself that in the future, maybe 10 or 15 years, they don't do something bad. So I will then use informants to collect information on them. So they have assessments that they do. This is something that reminds me of what the Stasi did in East Germany before it collapsed. You just collect information on people. Now this, unfortunately, is not just a recent idea about the inversion of the people and the government and who should be, whether liberty should be top of the hierarchy as opposed to government needs. Because it came earlier in the Nixon administration, where I was around, by the way, and I participated in all impeachments in the last 43 years, in which there were wiretaps that were imposed upon the staff and newsmen involved in leaking the secret bombing of Cambodia by President Nixon, and Henry Kissinger participated in that. And after there was a year of FBI investigations, again without any warrants, didn't turn up any information as to who might have leaked this to the New York Times. Henry Kissinger tells the FBI, well, you need to continue the surveillance so that the targets have the opportunity to establish a pattern of innocence. They should enjoy that opportunity, so continue to spy. Now, we're all guilty, so you need to spy on us so we can establish a pattern of innocence. A government that distrusts its people is a weak government. The greatest national security asset any government has is what? The loyalty of its people, willing to risk that last full measure of devotion, be unsparing in their austerities in order to enable the government to survive. And that's lost when the government thinks that you're all traitors and they need to investigate you for you to prove your loyalty. No. The three words that open the Constitution, the most important in the entire document, we the people. Revolutionary idea. For the first time in history, it was announced in a legal document, sovereignty was we the people. It wasn't the Pope, it wasn't some emperor, it wasn't some king. The sovereignty is us. And unless we give the power away, we get to keep it. And the default position of society is liberty. We don't have to justify our free choices. The government's got to justify why they can encroach on it. Unless the government comes up with a strong reason why you get to do what you want. And that's why it's so obtuse for many to say, oh, if you don't have anything to hide, the government, you don't have anything to fear about the government spying on you. Well, I respond to that person, because I'm a human being, I don't have to justify my right to be left alone. You got to justify why you want to interfere with my freedom. You got it all wrong. It's the government's duty to explain why they need to get the information. Not me to justify why I want to be free. That's my privilege, because I'm a human being. And I'm born with that right. Now we'll say, we the people, just gone out the window. Sovereignty is everywhere in the government. And it comes up in very small ways, but it's very telling. And when Nancy Pelosi was asked, well, what's the constitutional for this Affordable Health Care Act? What's her response? Are you kidding? Constitution, what's that? This is the same lady who said after she became Speaker, impeachment's off the table. Now, with a stroke of a pen, just whited out the Constitution. Perhaps its most important provision on checking executive abuses. Said, Mr. Speaker, can you white out the First Amendment too? Second Amendment, which ones? And so we now have, in lieu of the idea that we the people are sovereign and the government is limited, the opposite. The government can do anything it wants to do, unless you can argue that, well, you're actually just an inch away from Adolf Hitler's extermination camps. You know, that's the standard. You know, that's what we're willing to accept. Anything short of an extermination camp? Now, Glenn asked, well, why should we care? Why should we care? Well, we care because we're Americans, and we embrace the theory of the rule of law, due process, because of what it says about us. Not about what it says about our opponents or the enemy. It's what it says about us. We're civilized. We don't take anybody's life without due process. I mean, even the Israelis gave Adolf Eichmann a trial. We can't indulge that. Even those accused at Nuremberg got a trial, just didn't wipe them out with vaporizing predator drones. We've been reduced to brutes. It is a truth that people are unwilling to accept. We are at the pre-Magna Carta stage of law. That all of our rights now, instead of being inherent and unalienable, they're all at the indulgence of the President. The President signed the National Defense Authorization Act that gives him this enormous power to use the military to come knock on our door and say, I'm taking you to Guantanamo. Why? I don't need to tell you. With a statement, I'll only use it against the bad. I'll sign it, but I only use it against the bad. Yeah, even if that were true. The principal does what? Lies around like a loaded weapon, ready to be used by the next Caligula who occupies the Oval Office. And there will be Caligulas in the Oval Office. We see them running for president all the time. I don't need to name names, it's obvious to the audience who they are. Well, I won't use them. That's not an argument. That's the rule of law, not a rule of men. And trust but verify. The chains of the Constitution are what protect us, not the goodwill of the tyrant, of the president. All of our rights at the indulgence of the president were reduced to vassals, reduced to serfs with a lord in the White House. That's not what the Founding Fathers gave us. But Ben Franklin anticipated this possibility. When he emerged from the Constitutional Convention in 1787 outside of Philadelphia, a young lady approached him and said, Dr. Franklin, what do we have, republic or a monarchy? And he retorted, a republic if you can keep it. Each generation has to fight to keep these principles undisturbed, unmolested, untarnished. They're not self-executing. In some sense, your rights are what you're willing to live and die for. I was in the Civil Rights Movement, and I saw it firsthand. All the rights of equal protection in the Civil War Amendment, without men and women willing to take those hoses, the cattle prods, even lynchings, were nothing. Separate but equal prevailed. And we confront a same situation right now. If we're not willing to stand up and say, we need to impeach people who assert these grave, omnipotent powers that reduce us to inkblots in the political system. And we don't care at the outset, oh, it's so extreme, impeachment. I mean, it sounds like the banana republics. No. Ben Franklin described impeachment as a surrogate for assassinations. How you get rid of people who are exercising power tyrannically without engaging in assassinations, without the Ides of March, if you will, without a coup d'etat. So why do we shun that? I was involved in the Nixon impeachment, and what happened to Mr. Nixon after? He sort of became an elder statesman. No, he didn't go right, like Napoleon on Devil's Island. So it's not like a coup d'etat. It needs to be exercised. And it's open and notorious. The president has flouted the Constitution with assassinations and usurping the war power, things that the Founding Fathers expressly described as impeachable offenses, efforts to subvert the Constitution, in the words of the Founding Fathers. Those are those impeachable offenses. And of course, it's not limited just to the president. You can impeach members of Congress. The very first impeachment was against Senator Blount. Nancy Pelosi should have been impeached for those absurd statements that she made. She took an oath under Article 6 to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And there she's openly saying, yeah, doesn't bother me. That's not my oath. When she said impeachment's off the table, she didn't say, that's because the Constitution requires it. She said, because otherwise I think the Democrats might lose the 2008 elections. That's a defense to an impeachable offense. Where's that in the Constitution? A total and complete sabotage. A disgrace. And all of her peers shrugged shoulders, well, business as usual up there. Because the members daily honor the Constitution in the breach rather than the observance. In the breach rather than the observance. They read the words and they don't understand any of it. They don't understand any of it. It's like reciting the alphabet, you know, when you're 2 or 3 years old. You sort of understand, you know, the letters, but it just sounds like a music song to you at that age. They don't know. And loyalties are to the parties, which again is the opposite of what they're obliged to do. There's only one oath. There's only one allegiance everyone in this room has. And everyone in Congress has. It's to the Constitution of the United States. And there's no ambiguity about it. It doesn't say you have a loyalty to the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, the Libertarian Party, or anything else. The Constitution is our rule book. It's our secular Bible, if you will. We pay by these rules. And if it becomes antiquated, we amend it, like we've done on 27 occasions. The Bill of Rights was an amendment. It wasn't as though the Founding Fathers were building a petrified forest that over time would become obsolete. The amendment process can work, and it can go fast. I remember the 18-year-old Voting Rights Amendment was ratified in 13 weeks. They're very profound, sage, courageous people who wrote that document. Now, where are we today in moving forward? Now, what can you do? First of all, I want to underscore, there is no option in a democracy for being a spectator. There is no option not to be involved politically that's morally satisfactory. Because democracies work only if everybody's eyes and ears are watching government for abuses and standing ready to protest. Because if yours not watching, you're jeopardizing my freedom. Because I can guarantee you the government will try anything if it thinks it can get away with it without public rebuke. A people of sheep get a government of wolves. Always will be that way. A people of sheep will get a government of wolves. We have to become involved. Those who say, well, I just don't want to get involved politically. I like Lady Gaga, or I like to watch the soccer or whatever, or American Idol. Now, come on. You know? Move on. You're not a child anymore. You're an adult. You're an adult. And that's the problem we have. We literally have an adolescent political culture. The motivations of an adolescent culture are sex, money, power, domination, and creature comforts. The adult culture is motivated by virtue, wisdom, and magnanimity. We need to become adults. And that's start with you. Now, Andrew Jackson once said, a majority, one man or woman with courage. And that should be an inspiration to all of you. It may seem the task is very daunting. We're all basically at the bottom of Mount Everest, looking up and saying, my gosh, we have so much to overcome. It's over 100 years of slow deterioration, of fidelity to our highest principles. It's going to take a long time. It's not going to happen with one election or 2 elections. It's a lifetime's job. But that can never daunt us. Every great movement in the history of civilization began with one person saying, it is wrong. Even if that person never got an obelisk, never got a poem, never got a building. The first person who said slavery is wrong. The first person who said religious bigotry is wrong. The first person who said women's subjugation is wrong. We don't even know who they are. They're probably obliterated into the sands of time. But we're glad someone began it. And we are the ones who need to restore. We need to begin the restoration of the American Republic. We need to begin it. And that's a commitment that everyone in this room has to have. You write your member of Congress, you say, why haven't you introduced a bill to repeal this obnoxious National Defense Authorization Act? And that you're going to move to get them impeached unless they submit a bill to revoke it. They demand, we need to impeach presidents who claim they can assassinate American citizens, not be there complacently. And if they don't do that, they will get voted out of office and they will lose your support. And these are the kinds of things that you need to communicate not only to members of Congress, it's got to be your conversation over dinner, with your friends, with your associates, so that the entire political culture changes. This is what it was like at the founding. People weren't talking about whether they were going to have chocolate ice cream or whatever. No, they were talking about the Stamp Act. They talked about fighting the oppressive regime of King George III. Just read their letters. Read their conversations. There are multiple higher levels of literacy, despite the absence of formal learning, than today. You know, people know everything and they know nothing. Their attention span is nanoseconds. They multiply the ability to spread blather at ever-increasing and accelerating speeds. That does nothing for enlightenment. Because they don't read philosophy. Why we're here. What makes us American? What should make us proud? So we can go back like in 1776, and I am an American, I handed that off to those yet to be born, and they will be proud of what I did. And all I can say is this, and I can say I've been in Washington 43 years, and despite all the bleakness that's been presented to you, it's actually worse. It's a concession to the shortness of life that we haven't gone long. But it's a concession to the shortness of life. I could sit here for hours and give you detailed anecdotes about the fecklessness, the cowardice, the baseness of political motivations that are daily occurrence. But we still have the opportunity, with the freedoms that remain, free speech, freedom of association, to recapture, with far less risk and austerity than those who survived Valley Forge, Cemetery Ridge, Omaha Beach. You know, we need to be tough. We can't flinch. And if we do, history will treat this generation with great odium and contempt, if you will. Because we, after the demise of the Soviet Union, had the opportunity to basically turn inwards, to make the Union more perfect, to devote ourselves to self-discipline. There was no conceivable existential threat, even with those of very, very powerful and vivid imaginations. You just couldn't even create it. And it's up to us to honor what George Washington said at the Constitution Convention. Let us set a standard to which the wise and honest may repair.